We've got 6 goals, and those are as follows for today's session. We've got what is a brand? We'll hope to address that right off the bat just to level set the audience and get everybody on the same page. We'll have where does it live? Discuss a little bit about the intangibles of branding and how that works. We'll move into how it's formed, essentially our ability to control, manage, impact, etc., whatever it might be in the world of branding that we have at our fingertips. So we'll discuss what is the right approach there. We'll address the age-old question of what is the power of 10. I'll give you a little hint. It has something to do with ROI for today's talk. And we'll talk about a simple method that you can use for measuring your brand in the audience, with your audience and stakeholders that are out there, as well as how you can build a strategic positioning model. A strategic positioning model is essentially finding the ground that you need to drive your brand forward in the most effective manner. So let's get started. Let's ask the question, what is a brand? The American Graphic Institute of Graphic Artists, that's the AIGA's definition, says that a brand is a person's perception of a product, service, experience, or organization, the art and science of brand building, thus the act of branding itself. So now we're all on the same page, and we're going to talk about a brand today from the perspective of perception, because that's our industry's definition of a brand. It is not the reputation. A lot of people think a reputation is a brand, but I like to think of a reputation as that yardstick, that measurement. It's good, it's bad, it's strong or weak. As you change your behavior, as you change your experiences, as you change your offering in the marketplaces, that reputation goes up or down. So it's not the brand that's going up or down, it's the yardstick or the measurement of that brand. The brand, after all, is just the perception of that product or service that's individually held in the marketplace. So now that we're all on the same page, let's take a look at our second question for the day. And that is, where does it live? On one hand, you've got what your customer needs or wants. And on the other hand, we as business owners and marketers, we have what we provide. We like to define the space between these 2 points of intersections as where the brand lives. It is that intangible perception. Now, the trick in our world as branding marketing individuals is to essentially align these 2 points as closely as we possibly can and define that intersection of thought and to help guide, if you will, that perception in the process. The better we do our job, the closer those materials of thought and perception overlap between what your customer needs and wants and what you provide. And so our job really is to think about how we can create that overlap and how we can create that very, very strong overlap in that process. If you're going to deal with the issues of perception in the marketplace, the best you can hope for is to manage those perceptions. I cannot force an individual to think something. I can't. If I could, you guys would all be thinking this is the best webinar on the planet you've ever attended. But the reality is we can only influence that process as marketers. And that's important to keep in mind. So we've got a short story today. We're going to tell you about what we consider to be one of the most influential stories in the history of all of perceptions. So the story of perception is between the world of diamonds and the world of rings. And it's perhaps the best example of branding of all time that we have to look at because it runs through the course of time. We can look at the symbolisms of rings that date back to cavemen who would tie cords made of braided grass around his chosen mate's wrist or ankles or waist to bring her spirit under his control. And we can advance throughout time to the Egyptian time period, about 1300 BC, when the Egyptians buried bands of gold rings as a part of their process and rituals to signify their status in life. We can advance even further in time to the Roman periods, because diamonds, as we know, go back about 6,000 years, their earliest records. The Roman naturalist who wrote in the 1st century AD. Pliny said, "A diamond is the most valuable, not only of precious stones, but of all things in the world." So we have rings, and we have diamonds, and we have thousands of years of traditions and activities that have occurred with mankind. And yet, these worlds do not come together until the year 1215, when Pope Innocent III, one of the most powerful popes of the Middle Ages, declares a waiting period between a betrothal and the marriage ceremony, and thus the engagement ring is born. And as we see time comes together, it isn't but a couple hundred years later that the actual first gemstones and wedding bands and rings truly marry up. And if we fast forward to when the Archduke Maximilian of Austria proposes marriage to Mary of Burgundy in the year 1477, we get the first diamond recorded record of a diamond engagement ring. And a few hundred years later, we have, in fact, the largest discovery of diamonds known to mankind. The year is 1866 in South Africa on a farm. And now, what is a rare and precious commodity of a stone is now in mass for all of the world to share and enjoy. And yet, very little has really changed with diamonds and rings and the marriage proposal process. And that is until we get the birth of Cecil Rhodes, who establishes the De Beers Mining Company. And for those of you that have never seen a diamond mine, there's a lovely picture. Now, you're a product and a marketer. All of us have companies, and we're all figuring out, how do we sell our products and services better? How do we drive pricing? How do we get the consumers to enjoy our product, come back for more, buy more? And you're Cecil, and you're sitting there thinking, I've got the world's largest supply of diamonds. And what was once rare and precious is no longer rare and precious, because I've got more than I could possibly use. That I got more than the world could possibly buy. And you're thinking to yourself, what do I do? So you try a bunch of different things. Unfortunately for De Beers, nothing works. By 1919, diamonds were devalued by 50% in the marketplace. And by the late 1930s, the demand for diamond rings had declined to an all-time low. Now, if I'm the marketing guy for De Beers, I'm probably pulling my hair out by now. I'm sure a few people got fired along the way. And the frustrations are mounting. I mean, even the late 20s, the roaring 20s, did not help this industry sell more diamonds and more diamond rings. And so what they finally do out of frustration is De Beers is at their wits' ends. And they realize that when the GIs are returning from war and after the Great Depression, De Beers turns to the marketing firm of N.W. Ayer and Son. And they do what all good marketing firms do. They study the market to understand truly what the market wants and needs, and understand truly what De Beers is selling. They are looking for that perception. They are looking for that intangible space in the process. And they want to seek to overlap that space, because for nearly 60 years now, De Beers has failed to find that space, to find that common ground of value. And what Ayers and Sons does is they figure out through the survey and through their research that essentially during the recession and the Great Depression, people sold their wedding bands. They sold their valuables, because gold and silver is a commodity and it has a price. Today, if you want to go out and sell your gold ring, you'll get about 80% the market value that you paid for it, set by the indexes of gold. If you walk out there and try and sell your diamonds, good luck getting 80%. You're just not going to get it. And they realized that they had not solved the issue and the story of perception. Because after all, diamonds are not rare like gold. They're not a commodity like gold. They're not set like the value of gold. So we have a story. It's a story of perception. It's a story of finding that brand space. And what we realized, if we're De Beers, is that we never got the story right. And Ayers and Sons showed them what the customer truly wanted and needed and what they were truly selling. We had the buyer who was looking for a lasting investment, our gentleman. We had the influencer who was looking for a lifetime relationship and a symbol for that. And we had the product, which truly wasn't a ring or a diamond, but it was a symbol for eternity and strength. After all, diamonds are one of the hardest substances on the planet, known to man. And so with this, armed with this intelligence, they're able to launch the campaign, Diamonds Are Forever. 3 little words that completely turned around 60 years of failed success in positioning. Here we see one of the early ads. And it's important to note that because they were able to connect the positioning, manage that perception between the lasting value of the diamonds and the symbolism that it connoted, that by 1965, 80% of all brides in the United States were purchasing diamond rings. They even connected the diamond symbolism and the promise that resonated with money and value to other countries where there was no tradition whatsoever. And so we have the greatest story of managing perception. 60 years of failure, managed perception, 60 years of success. This campaign was just retired about 2 years ago. 3 little words, diamonds are forever. And that is our story of perception. So let's talk about how it's formed. If we're going to control and manage that perception and how it works, we've got to look at where it's formed. You see in front of you a series of rings. This is a simple diagram. You can copy it down or you can get a copy of this presentation after the fact. But let's talk about where it starts if you're a corporation. If you're De Beers, you have to look at your mission. You have to look at your values. And you have to decide for yourself, am I on the right path? Am I shaping it? Where am I going? You also have to look at your internal communications, your external communications. You have to look at your culture, your recruiting practices as a corporation to understand where these intersections occur and where these perceptions are managed. You have to look at your products and services, your operations, your marketplace, and the competition. Let me give you a little story about mission, vision, and values. We're just working with an organization. It's got about 30 plus offices around the country. Their CEO is determined to set their brand down the path of fanatical service. They took a look at their values, their behavior drivers for their employees around the message of fanatical service, and they realized that they did not have values that aligned with the notion of fanatical service. And so they had to reset their values. After all, we need the brand to be understood and driven from the inside out. In terms of internal communications, we're working with a company that had a lot of field offices. Those field offices essentially had no idea what the other field offices were doing. And thus they couldn't cross-sell their services. Again, an alignment issue, a lack of management issue around the brand. Most companies, when it comes to external communications, rarely test. I was talking to a CEO the other day who was telling me that he didn't think his channels were effective. I asked him if he had ever tested his messaging. He said no, he'd just been running the same messaging over and over and over again. I said, well, then I don't think the issue is the channel. I think the issue might be the way you're managing the channel and managing the messaging. And so one of the constant reminders that we'd like to provide to our clients and the prospects that we talk with out there is that if you're not testing your messaging, as De Beers did, and finding an effective way to reach the audiences, then you're probably giving up a huge opportunity to leverage your brand in a way that you didn't realize. So the secret to testing is not only to look at the messaging, but to look at the frequency. Are you placing it enough? To look at the channel. Do you have it in the right vehicle? Online, offline, radio versus TV. And to look at the actual design. Is the phone number in the upper left? Is the phone number in the lower right? And these 4 factors control how that brand is managed through those channels. If you look at culture and recruiting, here's a tip for you. Retention is traditionally a third higher in organizations that manage their brands and manage their cultures. They average about 50% more growth annually with about 40% more profitability. So brand has a pretty big difference when it's managed from within the organization. And in terms of products and services, well, you've seen a great example already. How do you position that product and service in the marketplace? We're working with a medical device company that manufactured rings, hooks, and stays. These are systems that are used in surgery. There's 2 choices in surgery. You can use a ring, a hook, and a stay during the operation, or you can have that young doctor in training sit there with a pair of forceps and hold the operational components open so that the surgeons can reach what they need to reach. It's not a pretty picture, but it's a very effective picture to tell if you sell ring, hooks, and stays. Because after all, you can sell it to the doctor or you can sell it to the nurse and the hospital. In this case, their salespeople love to walk out with their catalogs and sell as many rings, hooks, and stays as they could. And they would sell it as a product. But what they did not realize in this process, and it only occurred to them after talking to the nurses in the hospitals, was that they really weren't selling rings, hooks, and stays. What they were selling was a surgical system that made surgery simpler. And once they changed that messaging, just like the Bears, who faced 60 years of failure, followed by 60 years of success, they saw their sales take off in a way that they couldn't imagine. Story of operations. We're working with a client who takes product in that's resold in the marketplace. You buy a computer, you return it to the store. It comes back off the trucks. There's companies that buy this. It's called remanufacturing. They can't resell these products new again. So the products come in off the truck, they check it. They put it on the shelf, they check it. Before they ship it out, they check it. We said, you're sitting on a triple check policy. Now, this is important because in their industry, the industry has a habit of selling you the product, knowing it's broken or knowing it's wrong, and shipping it out to the customer base, who has sent their tech installers to put the product out in the field. They get there, the product's not right, the product doesn't work, and they're frustrated and they ship it back and they lose the time and they lose the client in some cases. So it's a really frustrating industry. But our clients whose operations are sitting on this process have a triple check promise that they can make to the industry. It says it will be right, or we'll ship it for free, we'll pay for the cost, you can return it. So they have the ability through their operations to affect how the brand is formed and perceived in the marketplace. Competition and clients. You can be doing great, plodding along, when all of a sudden there's disruptive technologies that come in the marketplace. Or perhaps you haven't been paying attention to what you're working on. We're working with a medical device manufacturer. For 30 years, they were known as the innovation industry leader. But over time, they lost that position. The competition came out with an inferior product. They took market shares away. And simply from the fact that they had fallen off the path of R&D, had a few product failures, had lost the ability to manage that reputation of innovation, had given up ground and conceded ground to an inferior product. So these touch points are critical and absolutely incredibly valuable if you're a business owner to look at, if you're going to think about how you're managing your brand. And I'd challenge each of you today to think about one thing that you do or don't do within each of these categories that can influence your brand through these touch points. And I'm going to give you a simple way to start. Just map it. Get a whiteboard, get a pen, get a piece of paper, and diagram it out. Start with the customer. You don't have to be an artist. A few sticks and a circle, and you've got your customer. Draw some lines. Every single place that customer can touch your business, from the phone and the receptionist, to the accounting and the billing, to the technical department, to the returns and merchandising and purchasing, to your marketing online, to the conferences and sponsorships that you do, to databases on your website, and map it out. This is the map from that customer I told you a minute ago that was about fanatical service. What they realized was that their customer service reps, after we mapped this out, was spending half their day hunting down information for their clients. It's not exactly fanatical service if I can't be responsive and it takes me more than half a day to find out the status of your order. Their drivers would drop product off after delivering it. And because they didn't have technology, the status of that product wouldn't even be updated until they returned back to the warehouse. And their IT department had basically managed to misinform the salespeople that they had, in fact, internet access and didn't have to wait to get back to the office to connect and upload status and sales reports. So basic mapping turned up the simplest issues that were affecting their brand in the marketplace and causing them to fail in the delivery of fanatical service. So this is a quick tip. Think about your diagram. That's one of your homework assignments from today's webinar. Let's get to our fourth question, the one that you guys are all dying to answer, I'm sure, which is, what is the power of 10? The power of 10 is based on the compounding impact and returns that you can receive through branding. Essentially, we can influence the number of deals, the size of deals, and the win ratios by finding that proper position and managing that perception in this process. And at the same time, we can reduce the sales cycle. Now, this is really a math formula, and you can add other variables into your formula. You can reduce attrition, for example. You can increase frequency. I buy from you once a week on I buy from you twice a week. So this formula can get even more complex if you want. And the assumption is basically that if you improve each of these categories by as little as 10%, you may think that's unrealistic in your marketplace. That's fine. Take a 2%, plug it in. Take a 7%, plug it in. It won't matter. Run the math, and you're going to find that you get a huge geometric return in this process. And this is why we invest in branding. This is why it's important to analyze those touch points, to look at that perception, and to consider how it is being critically formed in this process. Again, 60 years of failure, 60 years of success. Moving right along. We're more than 2/3 of the way through this webinar, so I hope we're keeping you entertained and hope you're staying online with me. How can you measure yours? I think for the most part, our industry makes this process overly complicated. As we learned from the Ayers and Sons experiment, you simply have to talk to the audiences that you're working with. And you do have to ask the right questions, and we'll show you some of those questions in just a moment. But I want to make sure that you can take this and practice a little bit of your branding processes at home in your own offices there. So, simply put, just benchmark the state of where you are today. And the question you want to ask is, give me 3 words to describe my brand. Good or bad, positive or negative. If you're afraid they're not going to give you honest answers, use a third party. Have them do it objectively. Have them do it blindly. You can do it through a survey and write down those 3 words. Here's an organization. Here's some of the words that they came up with. It's great. You can put them in a grid. You can put them in a list. Depends on how many people you have that you're doing this with, whether you're doing it with a few hundred or a few thousand, doesn't matter. You can map it and plot it any way you want, graph it and chart it. And the second follow-up question is, okay, was there any one of those things that need to change? What would you change if you could? If I could wave a magic wand, if I could grant you a wish, what would you change? And so what you see is you see a shift in this company's responses from their customer base. You see them shift from conservative to progressive. You see the shift from different to new, from political to street smart, from traditional to innovative. And we understand that we have some ground to gain in the marketplace around our perceptions through this simple technique. It's incredibly powerful. Anybody can do it, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to analyze the data and see where you have. And so to practice this, I challenge you, walk out after this webinar today, ask your employees, ask your customers, ask the influencers, ask your JV partners, ask the marketplace. Give me 3 words to describe my brand today and see what they are and measure them. You'll be amazed at the answers you get back. and it'll be highly informative in this process. And watch for the shifts and the state of the benchmarks of what you have. And then look at those touch points to decide where you can affect those shifts in messaging. So let's get to our last question of the day and our last goal for this objective, which is how to build a strategic position. I will tell you that it starts with relevance. You have to find the factors that matter. De Beer spent 60 years overlooking those factors. And so here's a few simple tips and questions you can ask yourself in this process. 1, what keep your buyers up at night? What is it? Now, when you write your answers down, I would challenge you to do this if you want to do it now or do it later. But the trick to this is to answer this in 1 or no more than 2 words. And this is critically important. You have to get it down to the essence of the answer. Can't be a long sentence, can't be a paragraph. 1 word, 2 words, right now. Think about it. If you got a pen and paper next to you and handy, write your answer down. The second question you want to ask is, what does your product or service address to meet the most critical concerns that they have? Again, 1 word, what is it that your product or service does to meet their most critical concern? Third question, what are your 2 most competitive advantages or key differentiators? I once had a client tell me they had no competitive advantages whatsoever. And I went, that's impossible. You wouldn't be in business. But I was surprised that they even thought that. So again, 2 simple words or answers, no longer than 2 words apiece, of your competitive advantages or key differentiators. 4th, what are the 3 core strengths of your company? These are the things that allow you to compete in business. A lot of times we hear things like it's the fact that we're 100 years old. Or we hear that it's our people, or it's our knowledge. That's okay. It's your core strength. It's the things that you have. Your manufacturing speed. That may be something you have that allows you to compete. And something you're really good at. And last but not least is, what does your brand promise? So these are 5 basic questions you can ask about your brand in the marketplace. And you should be able to answer them in 1 word or 2 at most. And if you haven't, then you haven't done a good job of distilling down your brand. And you also haven't found the ability to put yourself into a strategic position. And I'm going to show you why in just a second. So you've got your questions, you've got your answers. We can move forward, and I'll show you what you do with your answers right now. So we like to think of this as the brand pyramid. I use the analogy often, it's a mountain. The bottom of the mountain, it's a cheap real estate. It's a swampland, mosquitoes, the air is not so great. The top of the mountain, it's a summit. It's the highest point we can get. The air is fantastic. The views are incredible. 360 degrees, I can see. Everybody can see me. Momentum rolls downhill a heck of a lot easier than it goes uphill. It's the best to defend militarily. There's less real estate, and it's most expensive. And in the sky, think of that blue box at the top of the mountain as the sky. We like to think of that as what the customer dreams or wants. And so let's fill out our mountain, thinking about the answers to those questions we just gave. At the bottom of the mountain, we're going to put our core competencies. That was question number 4, those answers. As we move up the mountain, we get past the tactical brand space, and we get into that tree line where things start to thin and clear, and we get essentially those value adds and key attributes. We can move further up the mountain, and we get to our answers to our question number 2, which is, what does your product or service address to meet the most critical concerns? We get to what keeps the clients up at night. What do they need and want from us most? And that was the first question we asked of relevancy. And the last question, as you'll notice, is missing, still question number 5, is the strategic brand space, which is, what does your customer promise? What is your promise to the customer that you're asking for? So if you've got your 1 word or 2 answers, you can fill them out in your mountain, and you can build a brand pyramid. Now, this is a valuable model because you're going to use it as a filter to control your messaging. And I'm going to show you how. It starts by building your messaging from the top down. So we're going to build a top-down script. And the content order matters. It's critically important to finding that real estate and managing that perception. And so a top-down positioning script is based on three things. Why does it matter to me? What you do, and how you do it. And a really great script looks a little something like this. So we've got some practice scripts for you here to give you a sense of how this works. Let's take a testing device manufacturer, for example. Here's a mountain. Let's fill it out. At the bottom, they've got their industry expertise, their operational excellence, their global customer support. Great stuff. It's tactical by itself. It won't win them business. Let's move up the mountain. Well, we can look at their product. It's got some fantastic reporting. It's tremendously reliable. In their case, the product was too reliable. It never broke. It lasted 50 years, and they couldn't sell enough of them. Planned obsolescence was a tip. Just to keep that in mind if you've got one of those products. We go further up the mountain, and we can see what we're selling to the customer that is critically important to them that our product does. It provides assurances. Because what these little black boxes do that they manufacture is they sit on the end of the assembly lines, and when the widgets come off the assembly line, they tell them whether they're good or bad, or they pass or fail, or whether the tolerances are met, or the specs are required, so that the screws screw in, the airbags, inflate and don't leak, and the pacemakers don't skip a beat. Whatever it might be that you're manufacturing, these devices, they test. And when we talked to the customers, we found out what they're really looking for was this incredible effectiveness from these testings. Because after all, if the devices fail in any way, somebody dies, worst case, best case, they've got to shut down the manufacturing line. So their promise is manufacturing efficiency to the marketplace. And this is their pyramid. And if we take the script and we answer those three questions, we can build a script that starts from the top of the mountain down and finds the strategic real estate to position the brand properly. So we increase testing effectiveness for product managers seeking assurances against defects through enhanced data reporting and reliable testers. Drop in our company name, add a tagline for good measure. And there we have a strategic position built from the top of the pyramid down. Let's look at a second pyramid. Software company, chemical software company. Here's their pyramid. Speed, robust technology, usability. It's great software. That by itself doesn't differentiate in the marketplace. It's tactical real estate. We move above the line. We get versatility in the software that's a little unparalleled. And we get, again, amazing accuracy in the analysis that the software does. But what's keeping their clients up at night is productivity. It's not software, it's productivity. And what do they offer in that relationship is a partnership to improve the engineering. So we look at their script. We partner with you to improve engineering productivity when solving complex chemical process challenges using our versatile software and accurate analysis. Speed and superiority are built in. Drop in your company name, add a tagline, engineering advance, and you've got a positioning script. Their sales have gone up over 30% since they've taken a new position. They stopped selling features and functions. Most companies that manufacture software think it's the software that differentiates them. In many cases, it's not. We recently conducted a survey for one client. We found that 64% of the time, the decision to buy the software had nothing to do with the software itself. 72% of the time, the sales guys were selling the software features and functions. Now, if you think about that for a moment, that's nearly 140% plus degree of spread of difference. They were not on the same page. Those circles were not aligned. They weren't even overlapping. So think about your pyramid, think about your answers, and think about the valuable real estate and build it from the top down. One more quick example. Here's an energy provider. You'd think that they're selling energy, right? Well, let's take a look at their pyramid. They offer you predictable billing. We've all seen that. You can get balanced billing in the summertime versus the winter. You get power connectivity. They'll hook you up. They're offering energy for electric vehicles, by the way. And they got great reliable support if you can't figure out something or your charging station isn't working. We move above the line. We get tremendous accessibility because they've got charging stations everywhere. And you can be sure those charging stations are working when you pull up to them. And they're highly responsible, making sure that the energy and the power grid that they supply is environmentally friendly as well. But we know that what keeps our buyer up at night is confidence, whether he can go where he wants to go. And so our promise is freedom of range anxiety. So our script looks a little something like this. We offer the freedom to travel nationally with confidence that anywhere you go, you'll have access to the power of thousands of charging stations. drop in your company name, add a tagline, be free. So you've got your script, you've got your pyramids, you understand how positioning works, and you've seen the power of failure and success as evidenced by 60 years of failure and 60 years of success with DeBears. And you realize that the touch points, if you look at them and study them and come up with one thing, can affect your brand and the message in the marketplace. The last thing you want to do after you build your scripts is check to see what you currently have. And that is making sure that the brand materials that you're putting out there support the promise, support that strategic position, start at the top of the message, and build it down. And if your brand materials do that, great. You've done an excellent job, and you should be rocketing right along as a marketer. If not, you've probably got some adjustments to make in the marketplace. So, what do we know? Our 6 goals for the webinar today: keeping it brief, keeping it tight. 1, brand is a person's perception of a product, service, and organization. 2, it exists between what you sell and what your customers need and wants. 3, a brand is formed through the touch points. 4, the power of 10 equals geometric returns. 5, we can measure our brand with 3 words. And we can manage perception with brand positioning. You now know what the top of the mountain looks like, and you can build one for yourself. It's a simple model, but incredibly powerful and a tremendous filtering tool to decide how and what to do to manage your brand. So, just remember, 3 little words makes the difference between success and failure. Diamonds are forever. And that pretty much wraps up our webinar today. I hope you enjoyed the presentation today. We wanted to make sure that it was effective, that you could walk out of here thinking about your brands a little differently. It looks like we've accomplished that for our audiences. Giving you some tools and techniques that you can practice on your own. Simple whiteboarding, map your touch points, simple questions, 3 words, effective ways to build a model, 5 questions, 1 or 2 word answers. Practice your scripts, build them from the top down, and enjoy the fruits of your labor as you put it out to market. Don't forget to test. So, I'm Jonathan Fisher. This is BrandExtract. We've enjoyed sharing branding and the power of 10 with you today. And you can learn a little bit more about our brand and how we work through our website, www.brandextract.com. You can email a copy of this presentation. I will email you a copy of this presentation. That is, if you email me a request at jonathan@brandextract, and you can certainly call and ask us any follow-up questions you'd like later on in the year. I want to thank Employer Flexible for including us in this knowledge series. It's great companies like Employer Flexible that share the knowledge that they have and believe in impacting what matters with their customers and prospects just like you. So thank you for having me. Really enjoyed the process. So hang on the line here just a second, a little bit longer. If we can take any questions, let us know. If not, that concludes our presentation for today. We hope it's valuable, and we hope you'll think a little differently about your brand.